In English, questions usually start with a question word, and all question words start with W and H, which are also called WH words, including what, why, who, when, where, which, and how. Answer simple questions. As mentioned earlier, for computers, except for the why and how questions, which are complex problems, all other problems are simple problems. For example, now in 2023, if you ask Chat who the president of the US is, it will quickly tell you that it is Biden. There is a clear answer to this. This kind of question, the computer can understand it based on the question words and subject words. For example, the subject word of this question is US President, and the question word is who. And then by counting the answers to this question online, we can establish a semantic framework, or knowledge framework, about US presidents. Using language models to answer questions is not a simple match of one question to one answer, but to give multiple answers to the question, and then return the most likely answer according to the probability of the answers. For example, in the past, there were information like US President Trump and US President Bush in the media, which would also be counted. But today's language models are smart, and they give high weight to recent content. The answer you get in the end will be the name of the current US President. Of course, if the data has not been updated just in time for the change, the answer given may be wrong. In fact, it is not necessarily Chat. Today, with the Siri function of Apple's mobile phone or the Google Voice function of Google, almost all simple questions can be answered. Basically, it is done in this way. When it comes to Apple's Siri, many people think it is much dumber than Chat. Even if there are many questions about facts, it can't give answers and just say it doesn't know. In fact, this is a lack of understanding of US business and laws. As a big listed company, Apple cannot give advice to others casually, otherwise there will be a lot of legal trouble. In addition, as a product that users rely on every day, reliability is very important, and it cannot be right or wrong. Therefore, products like Siri are done if they cannot be done. Answer complex questions. After talking about simple questions, let's talk about the answers to complex questions. Computers and humans approach these kinds of questions very differently. When people encounter this kind of problem, there are 3 ways to answer. First, if you know the answer, give it directly. This practice is also used by computers. For example, the answer is on a question and answer website. In the past, computers used web search to provide that web page. Today, Chat extracts the corresponding paragraph. Why are the practices used today different from those used in the past? There are 2 reasons. One is that in the past, computers were not capable of summarizing text. And the other is that in the past, searches rarely analyzed the semantics of sentences, and it was uncertain whether the user's question was the same as the question on the Q&A website. For example, if you ask why is Apple stock not rising recently, the webpage will give you a webpage from 3 months ago to analyze why is Apple stock rising, because the main keywords in it can be matched. You will not know whether to laugh or cry when you encounter this situation, and feel that the search quality is poor. Today Chat is powerful enough to not make such obvious mistakes most of the time. The second way we answer complex questions is when you don't know the answer, but you know the basics of finding the answer. So, you use your basics to derive the answer. For example, when someone asks you why the sky is blue, you have studied middle school physics and know that sunlight is composed of 7 colors of light, and the refractive index of different colors is different. At the same time, you can also learn and use it, thinking that when sunlight enters the atmosphere, it will scatter due to different refractive indices, causing the sky to appear blue. However, computers don't actually have this ability. Several well-known companies in Silicon Valley, I won't name names here, conducted a comprehensive test on Chat and found that it answered the questions of elementary School Common Knowledge Class US, called Nature Class with the accuracy rate of less than 60%. Why? Because this part of the question is rarely discussed on the internet, or there are no reliable answers on the internet. And Chat has no way to use knowledge to find answers like humans, and can only summarize from existing answers. The third way humans solve complex problems is when you don't know the answer, and existing knowledge cannot directly deduce the answer, requiring you to do research work. For example, in the past few years, there have been dozens of masks on the market. Some work, some don't work, and some work but have limited effect. Which one is reliable? Although you can find some content in this area on the internet, most of them are outdated, or even taken for granted and wrong. No one has ever conducted a comparative study of all masks in the past. There is no good answer to this seemingly uncomplicated question. In 2020, the team of Professor Chue Yi, an expert in materials science at Stanford University, conducted a comprehensive study to thoroughly answer this question. For example, they found that masks that can effectively filter novel coronavirus rely on the electrostatic force on the mask fibers to adsorb the virus on the mask, so that it cannot enter the mouth and nose, rather than using fiber webs to block the virus. They also found that masks with finer fibers have better protection, while masks with thicker fibers have poor protection, which is very different from people's intuitive feeling. Later, Nobel laureate Professor Stephen Chu gave a reasonable explanation, that is, the electrostatic field is inversely proportional to the square of the fiber diameter, and the adsorption capacity of masks with thick fibers is weak. There are also many findings from this study, such as that once the mask is contaminated with moisture, the protection is basically lost. A review paper based on this research was published and widely cited. You see, for such problems, humans need to discover new knowledge through experimentation and exploration, and correct past mistakes. This is obviously something that Chat cannot do. How Chat works. So, where does Chat's answer come from? In short, answering questions and writing essays are based on its extraction and integration, or generalization, of existing facts. In 2012, when we tried the computer automatic question answering at Google, we did a grammatical analysis of all the high-quality English sentences on the internet at that time, about 100 billion. This is a very computationally intensive thing, and the calculation amount is about 100 million times that of doing simple statistics on these sentences. After completing this arduous task, you can get to types of knowledge. One is the knowledge contained in each article, and the other is the knowledge graph of the whole network. Prior to this, Google acquired a small company specializing in building knowledge graph. That small company has completed the summary of millions of knowledge points and constructed the relationships between them. After analyzing trillions of sentences, this knowledge graph has been greatly supplemented. It must be mentioned here that the work in the middle still requires human intervention and cannot be done entirely by machines. Later, the vice president in charge of Google Knowledge Graph came to Apple and is the head of Apple's Siri today. Apple's Siri actually has a knowledge graph behind it. The same is true behind Chat. Although it doesn't publish how to use various knowledge, it downloads the entire Wikilingo, and Wikilingo has a ready-made knowledge graph. When someone asks a question in the question answering system, the question answering system first looks for possible answers in the knowledge graph. For the simple questions we mentioned earlier, as long as the question is reliable, the answer can usually be found directly. But for complex questions, some can be answered through several related knowledge points in the knowledge graph, but most can't. So, you need to go back to the original web page that provides knowledge to find the answer. This process is actually a process of reverse thinking, which is different from the way people think. For example, if I ask a complex question now, the computer will find dozens or hundreds of articles that may contain the answer, and then extract some sentences from these articles to form possible answers. Of course, in order to make these sentences look like a logical and coherent answer together, language models are needed. In other words, these candidate articles have raw materials in them, and the language model is a chef who makes it into a dish. If the language model is not high quality, the answer provided is a stack of several facts, which makes people feel incoherent. The reason why Chat does better than the previous Q&A system is not that it has more raw materials, but that the dish is more refined. Now that we've seen how various question answering systems answer questions, let's take a look at how they enable dialogue and writing. The dialogue is a bit like a fill-in-the-blank game in a sentence. For example, there is a sentence like this: since last year, the postgraduate entrance examination has become one of the most concerned topics for college students. What words should I fill in the middle? In this regard, the language model can give the words with the highest probability as candidates. For example, in the first half of the year, the second half of the year, summer, etc. It is unlikely to prompt unrelated words such as box, Beijing, and potato. Similarly, if one or two sentences are taken away from a paragraph, the language model can fill it back today. As long as the language model is big enough and good enough, the content filled in will read smoothly. If we expand from the sentence level to the paragraph level, you say a sentence, it says a sentence, it is a chat. It is the same principle as a text that takes half of the words and then uses a language model to restore the sentence. Since you speak to me during a chat, the conversation is divergent and does not need the next sentence to be thought of in advance. As long as it is smooth before and after, the chat can go on. If it does encounter a sentence that it cannot fill out, it will usually type haha, asking you to provide more input until the chat can continue. As for the writing of long articles, what chat does is actually imitate similar articles, but replace the old information with new information provided by users. For example, the two deep users we mentioned earlier are constantly providing new information to guide the writing direction of Chat. The essays written by Chat are actually not nutritious, and the content is just clever repetition. However, objectively speaking, the essays written by most middle school students today are not of high quality, and they are just copying sample essays, and even the writing is far worse than that of Chat. After all, imitation and plagiarism are not machines. Just as I was modifying this small course, Alibaba also launched a product similar to Chat for me to try. So I found a feature to write some simple emails. The text of Chat is US-style description, which seems to be translated from English, while Alibaba's is Chinese-style tone. I won't comment on the quality of their language, but this phenomenon shows a problem. What training data you feed it, it will write you what kind of article. Next section preview. You may immediately think of a famous phrase called garbage in, garbage out, which is exactly the problem inherent in Chat and even today's machine learning methods.